Hi, everyone. Welcome to live stream. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes for people to join, but I am joined here by the lovely Kayak team who I'll introduce very shortly. Let us know where you are dialing in from today. Also, just make sure to switch in the chat from hosts and panelists to everyone so other people can see. I'm going to go around everyone that's here at least to ask where you're dialing in from. Jokobas, you're next on my screen. So whereabouts are you based?
We're in Berlin currently on a business trip. Actually, I come from Lithuania.
Sweet. Ali?
I am currently based in Boston, USA.
Nice. And Matt?
Yeah, I'm also in Berlin, but also based in Boston, Mass, USA.
Amazing. We've got a bunch of different people dialing in from Berlin as well, Copenhagen, Barcelona, Finland, Zurich, Glasgow in Scotland, Cadiz in Spain, Oxford, UK, Bangkok in Thailand. Wow, thank you for joining us. It must be quite late where you are. It's always trying to find the right time zone so that we can make sure we cut across for everyone. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. Germany, Oslo, Manchester. Great. All right. There's an amazing presentation ahead. So I'm going to move on. We've already got 131 attendees, and I'm just going to go quickly through the housekeeping. So this session is obviously being recorded and is going to be available on YouTube. Plus, if you've signed up to this, we will send you a copy of the recording afterwards as well. We're going to have a section at the end of this live stream to do a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button that's inside of the Zoom live stream. Then obviously, if you're chatting, please send it to chat to everyone. We're getting a couple of messages through in hosts and panelists, which is lovely. It's very nice to receive those messages, but it's even better if everyone else is seeing those too. Keep the chat lively. We will obviously try and get questions from the Q&A instead, but if it's conversation come up, that's all good. We can cover those things too. And finally, please be kind. We have a Figma code of conduct we like to abide by, just being nice to everyone in the chat. These speakers have taken a lot of time to prepare their presentation. We just want to be respectful of that. All right. So my name's Hugo. I'm a designer advocate at Figma. I've been here for about 2 years. I used to work as a designer before that, worked on design systems. So this subject is extremely close to my heart. I worked on like tech steering groups and things like that. I was really excited to chat with Matt, Jokobas, and Ali about their experience, and they've got a really great presentation planned. So I am going to hand the floor over to them. And Matt, if you'd like to kick off introducing yourself, and yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Hugo. Hello, my name is Matthew Holmes. I'm the team lead for design systems at Kayak, and I enjoy creating scalable systems that connect design to development. Ali?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. I am Ali, a design systems engineer working for the design systems team at Kayak. Matt is in fact my manager, so fingers crossed I don't mess this up. At Kayak, I build custom solutions, plugins, and write code that helps designers and engineers work smarter. On to you, Jacobus.
Thanks, Ali, Matt, and Hugo. I'm Jacobus. I'm a foundation software engineer here at Kayak. I really enjoy working with designers and creating code that serves the users and delights those who maintain it.
Cool, Matt, over to you. I think you can just start sharing your screen and we should see it here within this view.
All right. Just see the slides? Perfect. All right. Welcome, Lean Team, Big Impact, Multi-Brand Design Systems at Kayak. Before I jump into this presentation, I'd just like to share a bit about Kayak. The company's journey started in 2004 when a team of passionate technologists and travelers set out to solve one of the most common challenges in travel, searching and comparing your flight options. In the next 20 years, this evolved to a global brand that operates in 60 plus countries and territories and 25 plus languages. The Kayak team is operating 7 travel brands in offices all over the world, comprised of nearly 2,000 teammates across Kayak and its sister brand, OpenTable.
Matt, 1 second. Sorry to interrupt. We're not seeing the slides at the moment. Might just need to pause on that for a second. I can see them on our side, but hopefully they'll be able to come up in a sec. I will just check.
You see them now?
I can see them on my end, but we're just checking them on this side. Yeah, people in the chat aren't able to see them yet either. Okay, I think we can see them now. Yes. So nice.
See the slides.
Right.
You can see slides, right?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Cool. So yeah, that's a little about Kayak. Next slide. So now as I previously mentioned, the Kayak product includes 7 brands. Kayak is our core brand, and the rest are branding the screen, which you might be familiar with for here in these locales. are portfolio brands that are focused on regional markets and build off the core Kayak experience. So here's a little summary of the complexity and range of our global product. We have 7 travel brands, 60 plus markets and territories, 25 plus languages, and multiple travel products. And most importantly, we have a lean and empowered global team of around 30 plus designers and 100 plus UI developers to support it. So as you can see from the last slide, the complexity of our product combined with a lean team meant we had to scale effectively and efficiently in order to properly support multiple brands at a high quality level. For a big impact, we had to accomplish it through the following steps. Step number 1, improve efficiencies in the product design and dev handoff process. 2, build a design system that connects design to code. 3, provide tools to test different modes or brands. And 4, create better alignment between design and development through a shared component library. Step 1, improve efficiencies in the product design and dev handoff process. We had some pain points in our old process we had to solve, both on the product design and dev handoff side. Product design, there were inefficient methods in the previous design tool to organize our teams, our files, and sharing and collaboration access. There was no way to integrate a product design workflow into our previous design tool, and we had no boilerplate project starter kit to start every project for designers. For dev handoff, with our previous design tool, developers found it difficult to locate the final specifications in design files. And the previous design tool's inspection mode didn't expose enough design details or data, or even linkages to global design system styles or components, which led to inconsistent or incorrect implementations in development. So, how do we improve our product design process? First, we developed a standardized and well-documented product design flow. This starts with problem definition and then moves on to our design stages of concept and detailed design. Then it moves into our development stages of ready for development and then in development. And then the last stage we have is basically A/B testing phase, which we call an XP, where if the A/B test is successful after we launch it, we default it and we basically push it to production in place of the control. If it's not successful, that XP is basically discarded and it's either archived or we run through the process again in a new iteration to try it again and see if we can get it to default. So the next step was integrating this product workflow into our Figma workflow and file setup. Now all stakeholders, PMs, reviewers know the status of the design in the Figma file. Additionally, team files in Figma are also organized into project folders based on their status in the project, in the product design workflow, so we can track the status of projects more easily. And lastly, all Figma files are named a Jira ticket number, followed by a Jira ticket name for connecting design files to Jira epics and tasks. Next, I will demo a tool in our product design process, which is our Figma project starter kit file. Designers start every project with our project starter kit file, which contains a boilerplate file setup to track design from exploration phase to final specification and dev handoff. So this is what our starter kit file looks like for designers. Every designer uses this to start a project. Find it's a really efficient way of starting every single project. They basically get a cover sheet. They fill out our custom thumbnail. Again, other companies might have this set as well. You might be familiar with this, but it goes a long way. You get title, Jira ticket, team name, owner. All those things are important. We also have what's called a workflow canvas, where we basically have a designer describe what is the problem statement, what are the signals, what are the jobs to be done for this particular project, what are the metrics you want to hit or results you want to see. So that's basically the cover sheet. From there, we basically, again, this is a very simple file, but again, there's an exploration page where they can do research and exploration until they basically move on to what's called the work in progress page, where they would do the detailed design. And then they would basically review this with stakeholders and engineers and QA people and backend engineers, and all those people that might be involved in a project. They can review the design that's in a work in progress. This file has been set up also with responsive frames preset for our breakpoints. We're designing for all different size screens. And then once that is completed, we move on to the development phase, which is basically the development page. This is where the final design goes. And this is what we link to in our Jira tickets. So we always find the correct designs for engineers when we submit the engineering tickets. Again, we've added a new thing to this page. Basically, it's this note about dev mode and about basically marking things ready for development. We feel like this is a good combination of having the stuff in one place on a page, but also combining it with the ready for development features of marking it with the correct section. So that is our starter kit for designers to start. And so again, so how do we improve our dev handoff process? We created better connections between Jira and Figma. So again, all of our engineering Jira epics require a Figma URL, design URL linked to that development page of the design file. We no longer have issues with developers locating final design specifications. And then for design system libraries, Figma branch naming and publishing are also based on Jira tickets. Every change to our design system libraries in Figma can be traced back to a Jira ticket request, which gets used in the changelog communication to designers and for tracking changes in the library version history. We've also created some in-house tools in dev handoff as well. We created a custom sticky component for annotating or adding notes to a final design specification. This is way before there was an annotation feature in dev mode, which is also cool. We find that the stickies are still useful for leaving text or notes for non-dev mode users. And we also created section header components for labeling frames or on the canvas or to group frames for more complicated design flows. We now recommend the section feature in Figma for marking designs as ready for development in dev mode. And we continue to improve our dev handoff process with dev mode as well. So we're marking designs as ready for development. As I said before, we're making it even easier to find those designs for design inspection. The shared dev mode link feature is a game changer for us when collaborating with developers, handing off designs or QA testing a coded UI. Designers can now link directly to a specific location in their file in dev mode to provide the exact specifications or measurements in context of the feedback or Jira bug ticket. And the annotation feature is huge in dev mode. It's already providing value and save time, meeting and Slack time between designers and developers. So that was step number one. Step number two, our second step to support multiple brands with a lean team was to build a design system that connects design to code. To give you some context, here are some of the previous pain points we had with supporting multiple brands. Our brand differentiation was disorderly, ad hoc, and reactionary. We wanted to move to a model where differentiation between brands was strategic and intentional, but also scalable. We had inconsistencies in design across different brands. We had no standardized design data schema across brands. We had no well-defined theming model for the product, which scalable to all brands. There was a lack of tools for testing designs and UI code for multiple brands. And lastly, there was no connection between the data and design tools and code. So how do we try to solve for these pain points? In order to build a multi-brand design system, we had to separate our brand identifiers, things like design tokens, logos, icons, illustrations of photography, which make up a brand theme, from our shared UI language, which we can think of UI components, patterns, pages, or views. Our product UI is then designed to be a headless system in a sense, waiting for a theme to be applied to it with the brand identifiers listed on the left side of the slide. Where our process is a little different is that we design the UI language of our product for Kayak first. Then we use the same UI language in all of our other brands and apply the correct theme for the brand to the UI. This allows our lean design team to design for Kayak once and then test their designs with themes from other modes, like our Kayak dark theme or themes for other brands. This also allows our UI developers to develop for Kayak once and then theme the same UI code or component with style code variables for other modes or brands, all powered by our design tokens. Our design tokens are then part of a bigger collection of design repositories for multi-brand development in GitHub that are consumed by developers, with packages for logos and icons also available. To illustrate this point even further, here's a button demo showing the brand theme applied to a shared UI language. All of our brands share the same UI language for a button, padding, border radius, label, font size, etc. And then a brand theme layer is applied consisting of brand colors and fonts. How is all this possible? All this is possible because we've created a functional theming model or schema for our product UI using design tokens, which supports all of our modes and brands. With a functional theming model, all of our design tokens have a defined function in the product UI. This means, for example, that colors are defined specifically for what they're used for in the UI versus what they look like. This means we have multiple design tokens with the same color, but each design token has a different function. This is also what makes the theming model works for mode or brand switching. The design token functional names are the same for every mode or brand theme, but the design token values for those names are different for each mode or brand theme. Brand switching can then happen in design and code, where there's a one-to-one functional design token name between brands and the value being switched to the same design token name. So as you can see from this slide, if you're familiar with design tokens, we've adopted the model from material design, where all of our, we call functional tokens, we rename them. We are calling them system tokens. They basically get their reference or alias from a reference token, which would be like an identifier for your palette colors. And then those palette colors basically get their values from hard-coded, basically hex values. So as you can see, we can basically create the system by which we create all these functions, and we can apply those basically to different parts of the UI. So the surface of our app screen, as you can see here, is Elevation App Surface. And then the content that's on top of that surface is called Elevation App Content. Now with light theme, you see that again, you have a white background with black text. And then in the dark theme, the same exact functional token names, basically with different values. You have a dark black background with white text. So design tokens are just one piece of the multi-brand design system puzzle. And we don't have time to go through all those pieces today, but it's an important area where we had to connect design to code and create a manageable, scalable source of design truth to support multiple brands. Next, I will demo our current design token workflow and how we get from Figma styles to code variables for multiple brands and UI platforms. So, demo time. So, for our workflow, this is what it looks like. So, again, the diagram, a general view how this works. In Figma right now, we have what are called brand theme files. They contain basically our color type effect styles and other tokens that we manage in Figma as a source of truth. We export basically theme.json, basically just a very well-structured JSON out of that Figma file. And that well-structured JSON is then basically brought into a design token repo, where basically we have a build process where that JSON is then basically transformed into code variables through another piece of software called Style Dictionary, which again, if you've done design tokens, you might be familiar with Style Dictionary. It's very popular. And then again, those code variables are outputted for the platforms that we support, which are web, iOS, and Android. In addition to that, design token repo also will output a NPM package for developers to use internally, and then basically and then a developer can basically then reference that NPM package in their package.json. And as we version the tokens and we release a new version, basically they can upgrade to the latest version of the token. So what do our theme files look like? So this is basically what one of our theme files looks like. Basically, it's almost like a sticker sheet of our design tokens where we define different parts in a token kind of hierarchy structure, color, topography, opacity, spacing, all those kind of things. And then from here, you can see we have different types of color functions: elevation, foreground, background, and border. We basically then, and these are also where we show all the styles for designers to use. So these are the styles that designers are also referencing in their files. So this file is doing double duty. Like we basically can sync up our design styles here for designers, but then also output design tokens for developers from the exact same file. So they're always in sync using this one file. And then basically we have the same thing set up here as well, where we have a dark theme, same setup, same functional names, different values. And then as an example, this is what a brand looks like. This is a Mondo brand, again, same sort of setup. So how does a designer start using these things? So as you can see here, as I said before, here's an app design for the light theme for Kayak. There's Elevation App Surface applied there. The dark version also has Elevation App Surface as a style, and then Mondo has an Elevation App Surface as well. So again, those are all the styles that everyone's using. As you'll notice too here, again, the namings are important, and you'll see how we're trying to align those namings even better. And then from those theme files, extract what's called structured JSON. So this is what a theme JSON file looks like. As you can see here, we have our JSON tree. We have a defined section so the developer knows its color. So it's color, elevation, app, surface, and it gives you a token value. And then this JSON, again, through Style Dictionary, through some scripts that we've created for ourselves internally, will then output something like this, which is an example of a less file. So it's less in our React components. And basically, these are the less variables that a developer can reference. And when they're inspecting a design and they see something called Elevation App Surface in dev mode, they know to use Elevation App Surface, the variable, right, as a code variable when they're building the component or building the design. So it's a one-to-one relationship. Again, we barely, I can't remember the last time we got questions about what color to use. If that ever happened, it's probably because someone forgot to put it in, or there's a hex value that hasn't been changed correctly. But it really ever happens anymore. So that's a kind of a demo of our current workflow. And then up next, Ali is going to walk us through V2.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. So while this existing token workflow is well thought out and efficient, there's always room for improvement. So we made a few changes to workflow 1. Keep in mind that most of these changes are still under development because Figma variables are in beta. So one of these improvements include the new Figma variables and the functionality they provide. During this transition from Figma styles to variables, we are also experimenting with combining all of the current theme files into one collection using modes, which helps us switch between brands quite easily. Each brand still has its own single source of truth JSON file. We are also implementing extended collections, which enable us to use the Kayak theme file as the base and other brands as the extended collection. Moving on, in this new workflow, we're also using Figma Enterprise and the REST API to build integration flows that allow us to update theme files on GitHub and see those changes reflect on Figma, or the other way around as well. Let's jump into a quick demonstration. So in this new workflow, you can see that instead of a brand theme file consisting of styles, we have a variable collection that contains color, type, and effect variables. Different brands are represented as different modes, which makes brand switching way more easier. From variables, we either use our custom import or export plugin or GitHub Actions to export these variables as a JSON file directly into our GitHub repository. We use GitHub Actions to go from Figma to GitHub as well, so the other way around as well. So creating a continuous integration flow. Don't worry, we'll jump into the details of all of these steps in a bit. So overall, again, creates a continuous flow and saves us a lot of time that otherwise would be lost doing this manually, like Matt mentioned in workflow 1. The rest of the process, from building out code variables to publishing packages, is the same as the previous workflow. So let's jump into each of these individual pieces. So if I open the local variables, you can see that we have a design tokens collection with groups for reference, system, and component level tokens. So reference tokens represent static text values, as you can see. And then system level tokens or variables point to reference variables. Component level variables either point to the system or the reference level variables. So in design, so this is how the existing workflow is set up. You can see that on this with the styles on the right. So elevation app content, foreground neutral default, as Matt mentioned. But with this new workflow, we're experimenting with variables. So you can see that the variables have been applied to this design. So keeping one thing in mind, designers flipped out when they saw this because the semantics are different from what they're used to. So they're used to stuff that is readable, but right now it's not. But this serves a greater purpose. So this new semantic makes developers like Yakubas very happy. You can see that he's smiling right now. So this ensures that it's a one-to-one handoff, as Matt mentioned. So let me just hop on to VS Code to show an example of this. So sys color elevation app surface is what is handed off to the developers. And you can see that this color elevation app surface is present here as well. So a direct one-to-one mapping with that. So that pretty much sums up the first step. And then how do we get from variables onto code? So we have two ways of doing that. So a big shout out to Jake and Akbar at Figma for giving us the boilerplate code. So I'll jump into the plugin first and then the GitHub flow. So we have developed a custom plugin that lets us export all of our variables into a JSON file. So if I click on export, and then if I go into my VS Code, I can see that, as Matt mentioned, I have all of my variables. But this time we have them in separate references and system level objects. The second way of doing this, importing this is, so let me just make a demonstration right now. So let's just call this Figma webinar, call this more light. I just copy all of this into here. And then you can see, let me put this to the side, that now we have a Figma webinar variable collection. So I use the import option of this plugin to just import a new set of variable collection. And to just demonstrate a change, if I were to just change this value to, let's say, a black, and then just copy this, select the existing webinar, copy, paste, hopefully this changes to black. I was sweating there for a second, but it works. So that is the first flow using the plugin. And the second one is using the GitHub, the Figma REST API connected with GitHub. I won't be showing GitHub exactly because I'll get sued by my company if I showed you the code base, but let me show you a local version. So using this, if I have scripts set up, again, using the boilerplate code from Figma. If I run sync tokens to Figma, I'm calling this new variable collection theme. I let it do its magic on the back end, and then any moment now, perfect. We have another collection called theme. So two different ways of doing so. One with a Figma plugin, and the second one with a continuous integration flow from GitHub. Awesome. So let's jump into the future possibilities with dev mode and Figma variables. Since variables can be applied to radiuses, spacings, opacity, and other properties, it helps to scale and standardize a lot of props and their values that were once hard-coded into Figma. You can see this with the visual on the right. So you can see that a variable is applied to a corner radius. And when we open dev mode or inspect it, we can see that the exact same token that we give to engineers is referenced here. So a one-to-one mapping. They don't have to go back into their code and see what a 12 represents in their code. So this alignment not only helps us tokenize a lot of properties and their values, but also helps us as designers communicate better with engineers since we are doing the mapping for them. This ensures that both designers and engineers are using the same language, which reduces the gap between design and engineering, which is the ultimate goal. So let's jump into a quick demonstration of tokens in dev mode. So if I move to this frame, if I open dev mode, right now I see that most of these values are pretty static and hard-coded. Let's try and change some of these. So if I apply a variable to my width, for demonstration purposes, let's just go with a 360. And then if I apply a variable corner radius, we have these set up as well. Corner radius large. And now if I go into dev mode or inspect, I am able to see that we have this breakpoint extra small. And then we also have a border radius large. Again, really easy and one-to-one mapping, as Matt mentioned. So what are the benefits of this new workflow? So overall, there's a lot of benefits for the company because of this workflow. A lot more automations, which saves us time because we don't have to manually generate theme files for every brand by using external software, which is Stratos token. I saw someone in the comments. So Stratos token is essentially a software that we use to convert all of our styles into JSON. Now we're doing it in-house. We also don't have to maintain sticker sheets for color styles on Figma, which removes a lot of busy work from our schedules. Additionally, there's a lot more consistency and flexibility by using variables for different properties because designers can simply use variables instead of static values. Lastly, we really want to make devs like Yakubas happy. So this workflow has a lot of alignment with developers, leading to a bit better designer to developer handoff. So the third thing of the puzzle that really helps us support a multi-brand setup is through the tools that we use. So in this section, I will walk you through the custom tools and plugins that we use to support a multi-brand setup. So currently, we use the Themer plugin by Thomas Lowry, shout out to Figma again, which is a plugin that helps us swap out styles from one brand to another super quickly. I will show you a demonstration in a bit. But with this new process, we are shifting from Themer to variable modes that allow us to get the job done quickly and efficiently. The way theme switching, you can see with this on the screenshot on the right, is handled in our React Storybook is through separate stories for separate brands. So we have a story, we have a different group of story for Kayak, and then Momondo, Cheap Flights, etc. So we also make a lot of other cool internal plugins, but due to the interest of time, I won't be jumping into those. So quick demonstration for theme testing. So how it's done currently is using Themer. So just a reminder that this is the frame that is using color styles and this one's using variables. So if I change it, we've set this up with color styles. If I press Kayak Dark, my style or my design changes to Kayak Dark. We'll let it do its job. Awesome. If I change to Momondo Light, it applies Momondo to it. But with this new workflow, we can use variable modes, quick swap, Kayak dark, light, and then Momondo. Awesome. And then another way of doing this is changing the parent level layer instead of the children. So let's assume that you have this big frame with all of the Momondo designs. We make one for Kayak, and then we just make a duplicate and drag and drop it into the Momondo one, and it changes automatically to get the job done fairly quickly. And how this is handled in a React Storybook, as I mentioned earlier on, is by a separate story. So this one, the first story is for Kayak, then Momondo, then Cheap Flights, and all of the other brands that we are supporting. That's Jakubas's department. Take it away, Jakubas.
Okay, thank you so much, Ali. Imagine like designers making developers happy. That's so awesome. I'm gonna share my screen really quickly here. Okay, I hope it is visible. Creating parent alignment with a shared code component library. A company with so much history and a portfolio of different brands means that there were quite a few pain points that we had to deal with. History and teams with different competing technological solutions influenced the fact that we had at least 3 different tech stacks for a web-based product, probably more. So it was always a hassle to explain to new folks when they were trying to debug something. Oh, this is a page which is written with Angular, switch to a different repository. Or, sorry, this is a page that is written with Angular, but it's on the same repo. Or, never mind, this is a responsive React page. Then started this is an Angular page with React components in some places, or we're no longer supporting this as we're transitioning to React at some point. So this meant that for core components, there were often at least 2 different versions that developers had to maintain. They could not be shared and could diverge at any point, which of course they did. Contributing to this is the fact that we had documentation pages in our internal custom-built sandbox that did not cover all versions and had to be maintained with more manual work than desired. And with so much history comes the fact that there were always corner cases that designers could not always predict, which is sometimes ends up with some developer design. We even have a color library that we maintain ourselves. So not too long ago, in an effort to unify our tech stack and speed up the development process, our teams united and brought all their expertise to a project we called Shared UI. A shared React component library that could be consumed by a set of projects and a finally declared one source of truth. It's a monorepo of micro packages with good build tooling to ensure a great experience for developers. And with shared UI came Storybook, a UI documentation tool that you've probably all heard of. And for me, it was just fun to rebuild and reimagine some of our components. How often do you have a chance to do that? Product management is terrified of that. Before I show you some demos, I want to get back to more design-related topics. I can't tell you how many Jira tickets have been filed for inaccessible text, color, and backgrounds, which, for instance, on all our front pages, headers, etc. Some of them are due to us trying to replace colors from our deprecated color libraries with generic alternatives from our current color library. Truth is, they don't always quite work. It's always that one brand. And we, as developers, are sometimes bad at noticing that one wrong corner case, leading to problems in pre-production or even worse, production. So to illustrate that fact, I've included a screenshot of a tool we have for searching tokens with colors that match our search to a certain degree. It sounds useful at first, but when you think about it, it's more of a desperate attempt at finding a color that might work and not thinking about the context where said color should be used. One approach that has recently resonated with me very much is component tokens. They are semantic by nature and are well understood by us developers. And they eliminate the responsibility from us developers, as we no longer have to match colors with names we might not always understand, and designers can make sure they work on all possible brands, scenarios, and combinations. Sorry, designers. Component tokens also introduce new possibilities for automation and a more hands-off approach. However, as with most things, there has to be balance, as the tree of tokens might explode very quick. These tokens also aid in situations like the one I've included here. Initially, we had a color-coded price calendar that used our generic codes. They were great standalone, but when you use them one next to the other, they presented accessibility issues. I'm sure you're having trouble right now discerning the yellow and the red. Component tokens allowed us to introduce new colors for this specific use case that work together and solve accessibility issues. Sometimes you just have to have that. All of our great practices as well as component tokens contribute to our goal of fluency between design and implementation. It includes having consistently named components in Figma and in their coded implementation. I know that some teams don't have that, and it's a no-brainer, and it's a really good thing to have. And this can be taken to an even deeper level of having properties with the same names, which we've not yet accomplished everywhere, but we have an ambitious goal, as always. And enough history and theory. Let me show you what our storybook looked like. So for this initial demo, I've chosen a component that we're all familiar with, is the bottom. So first of all, our docs page. It's a template that gets filled mostly automatically. We have an import at the top, a default story that you can fiddle with to your heart's desire using the controls here. Some manually created stories for most important variations at a glance. An embedded Figma design view, which is pretty cool. And a changelog, which is an addition that we're proud of. You can also go into story mode and get access to tools for reviewing actions and accessibility issues. Funny enough, this is how Matt and I found an accessibility issue for the negative theme, even though it's sparsely or rarely used in our product, but elements do not meet sufficient contrast ratio. Now, this wouldn't be a Figma demo without talking about demo, right? And best demos contain fresh experiences and real-life stories, which I'm about to share. So calendar is a component that Matt and I have collaborated on a lot, and I must share my aha moment that I had while working on this. So for calendar, I got a Figma spec that contained a lot of updates that seemed minor at first, but for a component this complex, there was a lot to catch. As a user of Figma since 2019, from the design side than developer, I must admit, I did everything the old way. I was presented with this spec and I just inspected everything in design mode, going over each cell, each scenario, checking width, height, and position of every cell, and trying to compare it with the calendar that we already had in production. Then, thanks to our company giving us the seats for this mode, I flicked the dev mode toggle. And almost immediately, I had an aha moment. So first of all, an honorable mention goes out to seeing all the layout properties just by hovering on components and this nifty measuring tool where you can keep measures on your screen, whatever you need. And yeah, there's also a panel for dev resources. So you can have a GitHub link, you can have your Jira tickets, which like we developers, when we inspect designs, are often missing this historical context. And this really helps. And we have a component documentation link, which leads to Storybook. But the real star of the show for me was Component Playground. I can't tell you how much time it would have saved me had I only found this earlier. The ability to quickly see all options and just play around with them is really useful for a developer who tries to implement changes, for instance, in a component that already exists. And it just provides you with good naming and good structure from which you can begin coding and making your component. I think it makes designers think more about the implementation, sensible structure, and saves the developer some time too. So I will quickly switch to how a calendar day implementation looks in Storybook. So this is the Storybook page for calendar day, which is basically the same as you see here. You also have these different molecules for multiple days and stuff. And we have properties that are pretty similar to what we had in Figma. So we have selection type, which is the same as type in Figma, weak position, which is the same as position in Figma. And the reason for naming differences is due to the fact that properties in Figma are conditional based on calendar date type or state. For example, if it's in a range or if it's unselected or select on standalone date, which we choose not to have in code due to the complexity that it would introduce. We also don't have a prop for state. So for instance, hover and press state, since that is handled by CSS selectors, but you need to have that in Figma. And yeah, we do everything as a single component. It feels natural for us developers. Other than that, it's pretty uniform and easy to navigate both for developers and designers. Last thing that I would like to demonstrate is this kind of approach where you can have the flexibility that engineers really like, the customization. Since we're always presented with new requirements, we need to accommodate them quickly. So we're trying out this approach where you have an underlying component with all of the configurable stuff that covers the styles. It's different than what designers give us in Figma, but it's really configurable and it works for us developers. And we also have this public interface that would match the design better. And it would be more useful for consumers who don't need all these properties. They want to configure stuff really quickly, because in the past we had a lot of questions of people asking us, how do we configure this component for it to match this Figma stack that we have? And this basically clears up those questions, because you see configuration in Figma and configuration of this public interface matching the Figma. So yeah, there's that. And we have future possibilities with dev mode, as it's a really fresh thing. So we're exploring the possibility of having a custom code generation plugin that better matches the specific syntax and imports we use in our code across our projects, providing something that developers can use immediately if they choose to. We're also in the process of creating a strategy for aligning property naming across our components to close that gap between design and implementation. And of course, updating existing Figma components to take advantage of the component playground so that devs working on components can have that same eye-opening experience that I had with the calendar component. And Storybook really helps in that, because designers can basically come and see what we use, what we prefer, what our structure is, and update Figma. And of course, we can do the reverse of that process. So yeah, I will hand it over back to Matt to provide a summary. Thanks.
Matt, you may be on mute if you're already talking for a summary.
Sorry.
All good. I was
thank you.
pause.
Try this again. Thanks, Oli and Jacobus. Really cool stuff you showed and demoed there. So in summary, here are the 4 steps we took to effectively and efficiently scale for multiple brands with a lean team for the biggest impact. We improved efficiencies in our product design and dev handoff process. We built a design system that connects design to code through design tokens, for example. We provided tools to test different modes or brands. And we created a better alignment between design and development through a shared component library. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you've also got a question slide. We've got 2 question slides. I will put mine up just for argument's sake, keeping some dev mode branding in. Why not?
Great. Thanks.
We've got a ton of questions. Firstly, thank you all so much for all of that insight. The chat was extremely lively, trying to get people to add questions in as well. I know there's one that came up that we wanted to try and answer first. I have some of my own, but we're going to start with ones from the chat. So the first one from Rob Millington, Matt, we have a very similar setup, a very similar system to your V1 old setup. And we're interested in going to V2 using Figma variables so we can use nested tokens, etc. How did you go about testing and exploring this as a design team without upsetting the current flow of work in the product teams?
Yeah, we've been going through this as well, this transition, as well as trying to also transition to a new design language as well, that has some new palette colors. So it's good timing. So basically what we set up is that we basically just set up a testing ground where basically we set up a bunch of design files, what we call production design files that we manage, that we know what they'll look like, what our product actually is in production in Figma. And basically we basically set those up and we remap basically to what we have set up with our variables. And basically from there, we can go and do some design tests and make sure that what we're giving designers is really going to work. And we're going to have to go through several rounds of that to make sure like the namings are good, the linkages make sense, like the tokens are structured correctly. So that's how we set it up. We can set up a bunch of test files and we just go to town and just test away and make sure that things are before kind of training and handing things off to designers.
Yeah, there's often advice that we end up giving is this idea of creating these sandbox environments. You have to break it down in that way first, and it does require a bit of that manual override to be able to see what's possible. You can always also do like a shadow release of that library and get some teams to start using it and seeing what breaks. There are some fringes and some edges we know are aware and an issue with things like swap libraries. So often teams will end up backing styles with variables first before they fully remove styles. There is obviously when you're looking at these kind of composite values, styles are still play an important role, and a lot of this can also do with even just that educational standpoint, right? Like it's a big mental model shift, and what Ali was referring to as well, like in terms of the naming conventions, that's definitely something we're trying to think of a better way of serving designers for understanding it, because I think it's good that we've tried to make that easier for engineers because we are getting a greater alignment on what are essentially design decisions. But yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement. I'm gonna take another one that was, and maybe Ali, I can come to you about this. Typography is obviously front and center for a lot of people. I can maybe add a little bit of color to that, but how are you handling that at the moment? I think Dan Parks also mentioned a really nice solution inside the chat, but I just wanted to check what the team are doing internally at Kayak around handling typography.
As I mentioned at the start, so currently most of the stuff that we are doing with V2 is still in beta version.
Yeah.
So we haven't completely rolled this out internally. So we're waiting. And again, Matt doesn't like to implement stuff in beta completely for everyone, mass production. So we're waiting for Figma to roll out typography first, experimenting with it, and then rolling it out. So right now for typography, we have just left that with styles right now. So we haven't been messing around or playing around with typography with variables or styles. We just left it with styles right now.
Yeah, because there's a feature that you can use where you can use quick actions to select all with same type properties and then switch those out. There can sometimes be some challenges around how overrides are handled as a consequence of that because of the way that components are structured. We will hope to resolve that obviously with variables. All I'm saying to everyone is keep your eyes peeled for the next couple of weeks. Maybe if you're not following Figma in some capacity, then follow it and you'll receive some updates around this. But yeah, we should have some news, which we know has been the missing piece for a lot of people for a while. So yeah, that's all I can speak to right now around that. I'm going to just check, were there any other questions? Was there any question that you had seen in the Q&A that you wanted to answer that you picked up on?
Yeah, I saw a couple of questions. Let me open those questions up. First of all, there was a question from Demi. What plugins did you use to include accessibility checks on Storybook aside from linking Figma designs on the component? So for Storybook accessibility, we use this add-on. It's pretty popular, Storybook add-on A11Y. That's basically what we're not using much else on the design side. I know they're using a Figma plugin to check color accessibility. But if people have been using anything else for this automation of accessibility, feel free to share that in the chat. We'll be looking out for that. Okay, thanks for the question, Tammy. Another question.
Yeah, there were lots of stuff that came up around Storybook, so feel free to grab anything.
Yeah, so are your apps also built in React or SwiftUI for iOS and Compose for Android? Do you have any experience on how to handle all platforms that don't use React? Question from Henrik, good question. So most of what I've shared deals with the web because we have quite a bit to work on the web, but we have not really looked into making the same process for apps, or we're using the same components somehow, because we're not using something like React Native right now. Not sure if this is the best answer, but that's the answer I can give you. And I think there was one more question that I've hard to answer. Oh, how do you maintain the information in Figma and the information in Storybook? So a single
The
source.
classic single source of truth question. Yes.
I'm having difficulty reading it. Anonymous attendee. So thank you, anonymous attendee. Basically, so really good question, by the way. In the beginning, it was quite hard because Storybook was a new thing and designers just didn't know it existed. So we were telling them that, hey, there's this link that you can use to check out the demos of components. And we are in the process of including links and sections in the designs, the storybook, and then including previews of designs in Storybook. So there's this connection. As far as maintenance goes, there's always some things that you just have to do manually, but trying to solve the problem. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Yeah, not everything can be automated, sadly. There's some stuff like communication that everyone still needs to talk to each other for this to work.
Yeah.
Talking of which, I'm going to ask a question of my own back to Matt on process. You talked obviously a bit at the start around like what that ideal process looks like. But sometimes there can be this back and forth, obviously, between teams, even when there's something that's ready for dev. There's always, as much as designers and engineers try and work as closely together as possible in that early part of the process, when implementation starts, there's always questions and challenges that happen. So could you maybe describe a little bit how that works in future teams and then what that feedback loop looks like for the design system team?
Yeah. Thanks for the questions. Yeah. So for Kayak, we get front end and back end engineering into our product design process early, so they're informed, but also so designers can validate if a design direction or exploration is feasible. So when we get to the ready for development phase, designers have already received feedback from engineering, which they can use to iterate design, and then to present to stakeholders and then finalize the specification for handoff. So once the design's been marked as ready for development, we also have designers conduct a design specification review with developers before that handoff as well. During development, the conversation between the developer and designer doesn't end though, as there's always new use cases or outlier scenarios that pop up. But these are usually minimized by like the research conducted in the problem definition phase and a detail annotated specifications. And we don't believe in throwing designs over a wall to developers. Developers don't like that, but we want to collaborate with developers in a supporting role during development. So the design is implemented as specified. And then again, while dev mode is a great tool for handoff, it only works in conjunction with talking early and often with your development team. And then the conversation continues until development is complete. And let me talk with QA for validating any design and functionality issues. And then we have one final designer review to catch any remaining issues before we ship.
Nice. I love all of the different steps that you have within that. I think it's really important, both for whoever's responsible really for allocation of time within that team. And sometimes there's a bit more autonomy in terms of how that's handled when there's a lot of trust. But in an ideal scenario, being able to balance that time between what you're doing from an implementation standpoint to being in meetings and having these conversations can often save you a lot of time in the long run. And it's always trying to find whatever that right balance is between the two.
I would say one more thing.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Designers, if you can get into spec mode and spec mode works in the browser, it's just awesome. It's really nice to be able to understand what's going on there. And then really connect that back to what your design is doing in dev mode as well. So then you start really making those connections of almost getting, again, I wouldn't say pixel perfect because it's not always pixel perfect, but you can get pretty close once you start really digging into things and seeing what's really going on and make sure it's the right size that you want.
Perfect. I'm going to end on one final question, which is looking towards the future. And Ali, maybe you can answer this one. You obviously mentioned that you're looking at trying to build some more custom plugins, or you're looking at, is that both in the dev mode space? Is that outside of Figma? What kind of automation tooling are you looking at building for both designers and engineers?
Yeah. So as I mentioned for workflow too, we have a lot of automations that we've built in. So one of them involves the switch from version 1 to version 2, which is a plugin that converts all of our styles quickly to variables and how we want them to be. So that's one thing. And another one is the continuous integration flow that I mentioned. So things that get with GitHub Actions. to make sure that the process is super quick. And then other plugins that involve the process of deprecation. So we have internal process that involves deprecating components that we no longer use. So
Nice.
a plugin for that, which is super cool. And then I also set up like internal guidelines for other people to also build plugins for the company. So we have this document going on and then boilerplate code for us so that other maybe just designers that don't have a lot of programming background, so they can just pick that boilerplate code up and just play around with it and just make a plugin. And surprisingly, a lot of people have done that at the company as well. So plugins that their internal team needed, so they just came up with that plugin themselves, which was super cool. So
Anyone who's old enough to remember Photoshop scripts and all of those kinds of things will remember fondly that idea where we started to explore those options. Yeah, it's really cool to hear. And I'm, really excited to hear a bit more about the deprecation one, maybe at some other point. I think that would be a really cool one.
of course.
That, I'm afraid, is all we have time for. Thank you so much to everyone that's joined. Still got 145 people on the call. Appreciate everyone's time joining. We have a ton more live streams, obviously, at figma.com/events. There's going to be more stuff around dev mode. There's going to be more stuff about designer developer collaboration amongst a whole load of other topics. Thank you again so much to the Kayak team for all the insight. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you very much. See you, everyone. Bye.